Welcome to my nightmare. So, Pete has encouraged the various Sea of Tranquility participants and panelists to create their own content. So, I decided I would do it. I've always been a little jealous of when Pete does his listening room and he talks about the different things he's been listening to. So, I thought I would copy him and let you guys in on some of the things I've been listening to over the past weeks, months. And yeah, I listen to a variety of music. I listen to a lot of jazz, a lot of prog rock, psych, you name it. I'm kind of all over the map. Most of you know me talking about prog rock on In the Prog Seat, but yeah, jazz takes up a lot of my listening, and that's going to be in some of the stuff I'm going to talk about here. And I might refer over to some notes, but yeah, this is going to be a bit of organized chaos. I might ramble a bit. I don't know how long this is going to go. Let's find out. So I'm going to start. This was sort of a weird one. This is a record that's been in my collection for a very long time. Carnarius Dan's Visitor. So I happened to stumble on the fact that this was still available on CD, and it's something that's going to be on our Laser's Edge website later this week. Uh, this was a band that was actually a precursor to Secret Oyster, the great Danish jazz rock band. This has three of the members, Kenneth Knudsen, Klaus Bowling, and Ole Strindberg. Those were the guys that were in Secret Oyster. Carnarius Dance basically evolved into Secret Oyster. It's got a slight more jazz feel as opposed to the rock side, but it's it's a great album, and Klaus Bowling is just killing on guitar. What happened was the distributor I work with mentioned that they were taking over distribution of Steeplechase, and I remembered that Carnarius Dance was on Steeplechase, so I looked it up, and sure enough, they had a handful of copies of the CD in stock. So I scooped up what they had left, and as I said, it'll be on the website this week, and I don't expect them to stick around very long. The CD came out in 1997, so you can imagine there can't be too many around. And this album, oh, geez, I don't remember when. It was very early 70s. I mean, the vinyl. This this is the U.S. version on Inner City. Came out in 1976. So the actual Carnarius pressing on Steeplechase came out before then. Next thing, hopefully the glare is not an issue because really don't want to take these out of the sleeve. Oh, and I should mention also, I listen to a tremendous amount of vinyl all day long. I listen to CDs while I'm working. I've got music playing. I'm listening to all kinds of stuff. Metal, you name it, prog metal. But for my own listening pleasure, my preference is for vinyl. So that's what I'm focusing on here. If people enjoy this and Pete wants me to do another, I may feature CDs. But for the moment, we're talking about vinyl. So, Circus, moving on. This is an original copy. We recently had CDs of this in stock. This was the second album from the Swiss prog rock band, uh, considered by many to be the best prog album from Switzerland. Great stuff. If you're into like Van de Graaff Generator, perhaps has a little bit of a Canterbury feel to it in spots as well. Sidelong track, title track, beautiful, beautiful album. Really great, great stuff. Nice recording too. So again, as I said, this is going to be I'm going to be all over the map here. So uh, hopefully this is not too schizophrenic for everybody. Um, I'm an audiophile, and I'm not embarrassed to admit it. And one of the things I do is I listen for sound, and I'm always trying to get the best sounding copy uh, of a particular record, of course within budget. And I wanted to talk about Genesis a bit for the moment. So, Analog Productions which is run by Chad Kasem. out of Salinas, Kansas. Chad runs a great shop and label, uh, and he's doing reissues in conjunction with Atlantic Records to commemorate their 75th anniversary. And they're doing a cross section of albums from the Atlantic Records catalog, and they are doing a number of Genesis albums. They are going back to the original master tapes, and they are cutting the albums at 45, and they're getting great mastering engineers, Chris Bellman, Bernie Grunman, uh, Kevin Gray, are involved in these reissues. And so far, these reissues have been absolutely extraordinary. So this one was a complete game changer. Genesis Nursery Crime. Sound on this thing is jaw dropping. You won't believe it because it's Genesis albums in general were not really well recorded. When we talk about the big prog bands, ELP, Yes, Genesis, Pink Floyd, King Crimson, what have you, Genesis albums were always lacking a bit in production. Not terrible or anything like that, but not top tier. And Nursery Crime kind of suffered a bit. But this version, this 45 RPM version, is unreal. It's a game changer. If you've never heard the album this way. So sticking with it, they did they just did Genesis a Trick of the Tail. And for years, the gold standard was this Genesis Trick of the Tail on Mobile Fidelity. And Mobile Fidelity did a very, very nice job with it. And well, this new version, this 45 RPM version, beat the crap out of it. So just more linear, just great bass, perhaps not as great bass as MoFi. MoFi has a tendency to goose the bass, but top to bottom, this is just a much more enjoyable listen, more detail, just everything about it is great. So highly recommend that you dig in. Uh, they've done Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. They're going to be doing, I think, self-titled some of the later albums, and yeah, they did Selling Them by the Pound. So it's and Foxtrot is coming. So sticking with Genesis for the moment, we've been talking about these new Analog Productions reissues, and the one album they've skipped, which is a shame, is Wind and Wuthering. Wind and Wuthering is the album that really needs the most amount of attention because it's not a great sounding album. The band went to the Netherlands to record it, and it just kind of sucks. And for some reason, Chad is skipping over this title. Everybody's kind of hoping that we'll go back to it at some point. So my friend Jeff Carney, who's also a bit of an audiophile nut like myself, he told me, he says, you got to get the first German pressing. So it's a game changer. Well, I'm not going to swear to you that it's a game changer, but it is the best version of Wind and Wuthering that I've heard. So this beats a British copy, destroys the Japanese. First German, very inexpensive. You'll wind up spending more money on the postage than you will on the album, but it's worth seeking out. So what else am I listening to? Well, I got a big stack here, so it's going to take a few more minutes. So, you might want to pour yourself a drink. So this is one that was just sitting on the shelf for years, and I finally pulled it out. Never heard it. Couturier Celia Quintet, The Game. So, oh God, that glare. All right, I'll take it. I'll take this one out of the bag. So I've been getting this album's been getting a little bit of ridicule for the album cover, which I kind of thought was okay. So this is, well, it kind of looks like a French fusion album, but there isn't a tremendous rock element. I didn't know who these guys were, but I was informed after the fact by Georges Lamy that Francois Couturier, the keyboard player, and Jean-Paul Celia, the bass player, played with John McLaughlin. So there's a lot of great guys on here. Francois Junot, Andre Ciccarella, great drummer, plays on here. Sidelong track. I guess I would probably call this a contemporary jazz piece. I'm not sure that I would necessarily call it a jazz rock piece. I mean, it has some of that element, but again, if you're looking for a high octane jazz rock, this is not it. But again, it is a very, very classy French jazz album. And again, it's quite nice. And also cheap, very cheap. Uh, Here's one that Kate Broxton destroyed the cover of. I don't. I think I have other albums in the collection from Kate. This is from Charlie Mariano. It's called Reflections. Again, this is a U.S. pressing on Catalyst, and Catalyst was an interesting label, reportedly run by the mafia as a money laundering operation. But is that true? I don't know. So, but the interesting thing about the Catalyst label, they put out a lot of great reissues over the years. They did a lot of Japanese albums, a lot of European jazz, and this was Charlie Mariano, the great alto and soprano sax player. He did this album in Finland, and this album is like a who's who of Finnish jazz players and jazz rock players. You have Eero Kovistonian playing on here on sax. Also, you have Jukka Talonen on guitar from Tasavallan Presidente. Ali Avinlati on electric piano. I mean, the list goes on and on. And Sabu Martinez on congas. Great, great jazz rock album. And again, this is one of those albums. If you go, you go digging through the bins, you might come up with a copy of this. It's not a particularly expensive album. Probably like a $10 album somewhere, and it's a good chance you'll come across it. Now we're getting into some of the rare stuff. So this is an album from The Awakening. This is the second album. Now, this was recorded for the Black Jazz label, and Black Jazz has become a very, very collectible label. This has just been reissued on vinyl recently. They were reissued in Japan on CD a number of years ago. There may be copies floating around. If you check on Discogs, they'll come up with this. So this was The Awakening's second album called Mirage. And it's basically like what I would call like electric jazz meets spiritual jazz. I think jazz rock fans would enjoy it. It's gotten original copies of this are crazy expensive. I have both of them. And the entire Black Jazz label is worth seeking out if you stumble across them. Any of the releases, there were 20 releases on the label. So if you come across any of them, you should definitely dig in. More than likely, you'll see something by Doug Karn because Doug was quite prolific on the label. But again, great, great stuff. And to me, the two Awakening albums were probably the best titles on the label. Okay, this is one that Pete and I talked about many times on Prog Seat and Professor's Picks. This is like the best record store day reissue of all time. Charles Tolliver Music Inc. Live at the Captain's Cabin. Previously unreleased show from 1973. John Hicks on piano, Clint Houston on bass, and Cliff Barbaro on drums. And this is double album of just absolute fire breathing jazz. Just this thing is just explosive. It's a must own. We have it at Laser's Edge. We have it on LP and CD. You can find it probably locally too. So highly recommend it if you're into jazz. You need to have it. All right, in a totally different direction. This is a sort of rare album. I picked this one up at Hudson Valley Vinyl and up in Beacon, New York. It's the first album by Fat, and Fat were from Massachusetts, I believe. And this is bluesy hard rock with like acid guitar leads. The singer's great. He's a guy named Peter Newland, and he really stands out. And somebody mentioned that he sounds a bit like Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam, and I could definitely hear the comparison. So this is really, really solid stuff. All right, going across the Atlantic. Message from Books and Dreams. And this is the second album from the German band. They were on the Bellafon label. I'm reminded a bit of Nectar. They were a German and British quartet. Got Mellotron on here, a lot of sax. It's kind of heavy with like a psychedelic feel to it. And yeah, this is great. And one of the great covers, isn't that a cool looking thing? Message from Books and Dreams on Bellafon. Bellafon is a great, great label. All right, back in the jazz world. I hope you guys are not thinking I'm insane because I probably am a little insane. This is an album by Gary Chandler, Outlook, and I'm going to refer to my notes on this one. This was on a record that was on my want list for years. So this was interesting because it's on the Eastbound Records label, which was, if you know Funkadelic, Parliament Funkadelic, they were on the Westbound label. So this is Eastbound. This was the counterpart. And Gary Chandler was a trumpeter. This was his only solo album. It was actually done by Rudy Van Gelder, the great Rudy Van Gelder from Blue Note. He was the recording engineer on this thing, and it's like a who's who of like soul jazz. You have Dick Griffin on trombone. Let's see who has Cornell Dupree on guitar, Gordon Edwards on bass, Idris Muhammad on drums, Buddy Caldwell on congas. It's just really great soul jazz. It just kind of got this groove from beginning to end. Pretty rare album. I was very fortunate to find a copy of it. Pretty expensive. Uh, I listened to a lot of jazz rock, a lot of fusion, and I picked up the two albums from Shoot Libre, and these are great, great records. This is Alibaba. This is is I think the second, and Shoot Libre being the first. Uh, just top to bottom, fantastic uh, uh, fusion, flute, sax, uh, plenty of guitar, lots of keyboards, electric piano. You got Moog, Hammond organ. It's got they infuse like a funk feel, and man, it just works beautifully. These are two great records. Musea reissued them years and years ago on vinyl. I'm sorry, on vinyl, on CD. We're talking vinyl, but I'm getting a little confused. This comes with old age. This is a band that I've had in my collection for years. Great, great band. Black Widow, Sacrifice. This was their first album. They were an occult band. Uh, they ah, kind of like progressive hard rock. A lot of organ, great, great guitar, and the lyrics have like an occult quality to it. And I guess they were kind of trying to leech off of Black Sabbath, but very, very good band. Made three solid albums. This is the first one, Sacrifice. Love it. So I went and did something that hopefully my wife doesn't watch this because this is the most amount of money I ever spent on an album, but it's something I really felt strongly that I wanted to have in my collection. 2066 and Then, Reflections on the Future. They were, again, a German band with a British vocalist, Jeff Harrison. Great soulful vocals, a lot of mellotron, electric piano, some really weird synthesizer, long tracks, just really kind of like organ dominated, but two keyboard players. And yeah, as I said, it was a nice copy, and it was in a local shop. How they got this record, I have no idea. I was afraid to ask them. I made them an offer, and a cash offer, and they said yes. And yeah, I'm hard filing this one. I'm very, very happy to finally have it. I've had the reissues for years. We sell the CD, but man, uh, the original vinyl is really something. The master tapes are gone, so the reissues don't sound anything like this. Really fantastic record. On a completely different note, Cosmic Ground, Isolate. So this is the solo work of Dirk Jan Moeller, who is the keyboard player from the German psychedelic band Electric Orange. So here he's going all solo. He's playing here analog modular synthesizers, sequencers, Farfisa organs, string ensembles, mellotron, Rhodes, guitar, bass, Revox field recordings. If you like mid 70s Tangerine Dream, this is for you. Double album. It's got, well, there's not much to look at really, but it's great, great space music, Berlin style space music double album. He has a lot of them, but I happened to come across this one on vinyl, so I grabbed it. I recommend his stuff, and if you ever heard Electric Orange, I recommend those as well. Okay, now we're going to talk about a shitty album. The new Tony Williams Lifetime, Million Dollar Legs. So the first one that he did with the new lineup was Believe It, and that was a great jazz rock album, and that one has Alan Holdsworth on guitar. This one also has Alan Holdsworth on guitar, got Alan Pasqua on keyboards, Tony Newton on bass and vocals, and that's part of the problem. There's vocals on this record, and they blow, and that cover is really kind of sad, and it's not a good record. I mean, some of the instrumentals are okay, but as good as Believe It is, Million Dollar Legs, this one kind of sucks. You might want to flip past this one when you see it in the bins. It's cheap, but not worth it. So this is one that was on my want list for a long time. This is kind of unusual. Combo 8 Vibrationer. This was a Swedish band, and they were a Swedish fusion band, jazz rock fusion. Came out in 1976, horns and guitar, and they all play like crazy. A lot of energy here, gets kind of funky, and this was a fun listen, man. It was like everybody's like fighting to solo, and it's like look at me, really really good. Not super expensive, but not so easy to come across. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about is Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell. So, I mean, everybody knows this album, but I never had it on vinyl. And so I picked up a German copy locally. Pretty good sounding album. First album with Ronnie James Dio, the vocal god. I mean, who was better than Ronnie James Dio? In my opinion, I don't think anybody. And this was, man, this was a great, great record. For me, this was like a rebirth of the band. So if you're not, if you kind of dabble in Black Sabbath and maybe, it's got to be Ozzy, it has to be Ozzy, give yourself a minute to rethink it and check out Heaven and Hell, because this album is absolutely brilliant. So anyway, that's a little peek into what I've been listening to for the past weeks. And I have what I call the on deck circle, and the on deck circle is enormous. I've got to have a couple of thousand albums that I've never listened to that are sitting here in the collection waiting to be cleaned. Everything gets cleaned before it gets played, and it's like an obsession with me. It's like mental illness, but keeps me happy. So there you go. If people enjoy this, we'll do another one or two or three. We'll see. We'll see what Pete has to say about it. So let me know what you think in the comments, and we'll see you next time. And at the very least, you'll see me this Friday. Take care.